What kind of truth makes a contractor ask you not to come alone? How did a single phone call outside a church force me to bring my sons face to face with something their mother hid for years? And why did everything I believed about my family collapse the moment that office door was opened? Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. My name is Reid Trenner. I am 49 years old. I work as a customs broker. I have been doing this job for 23 years. Numbers, forms, regulations, that is my language. I understand systems. I understand how things are supposed to move through channels. I understand documentation. What I never understood, until recently, was my own wife. Marissa passed away 1 year ago. Ovarian complications, they said. It was fast. Faster than anyone expected. 1 month she was organizing charity dinners and picking out new curtains for the kitchen. The next month she was in a hospital bed, and then she was gone. Just like that. The world kept spinning, but mine stopped for a while. I developed a routine after she passed. Every Sunday morning, I would drive to St. Michael's Church, sit in the parking lot for exactly 15 minutes, and then go inside for the service. I never sat in the front, always the back left corner, third pew from the wall. Marissa used to sit there with me before the boys grew up and moved out. It felt right to keep that spot warm. That particular Sunday was no different. November air, cold and sharp, the kind that makes your breath visible and your fingers stiff. I had parked my silver Buick in the usual spot, near the old oak tree that drops leaves on everybody's windshield. Engine off, hands on the steering wheel. I was watching the families walk into the church, mothers holding children's hands, fathers checking their phones one last time before silencing them. That is when my phone rang. I did not recognize the number at first. It was local, but not saved in my contacts. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Mr. Trenner? Speaking. This is Gavin Holt. I'm the contractor working on the renovation at your wife's old office building on Birch Street. I remembered. Marissa had kept a small office in that building for years. Some kind of consulting work, she always said. Tax preparation for small businesses, estate planning support. She closed it down about 3 years before she passed. Said it was not worth the lease anymore. I never questioned it. Yes, Mr. Holt, how can I help you? There was a pause. I could hear noise in the background, the hum of equipment, distant voices. Sir, I need you to come down here. We found something during the demolition of the East Wing. Found something? Another pause. Longer this time. I can't explain it over the phone. You need to see it yourself. I looked through my windshield at the church doors. Service was about to start. What exactly did you find, Mr. Holt? Sir? His voice changed. Lower. Careful, like he was choosing his words with precision. I really think you should bring someone with you. Your sons, if possible. Both of them. That stopped me cold. I had not mentioned my sons to this man. I did not even remember ever meeting him in person. Marissa had handled all the office matters herself. The lease, the keys, everything. Why would I need to bring my sons? Because what's in here, it's going to affect them too. And you shouldn't see it alone. I sat there for a long moment. The church bell started ringing. The 5-minute warning before service began. People were hurrying inside now, closing doors behind them. I'll be there in 2 hours, I said. Thank you, sir. The building address is 447 Birch Street. Use the side entrance. I'll be waiting. He hung up. I stared at my phone for another minute. Then I put it in my pocket and watched the last few people disappear into the church. I did not go inside that day. Instead, I sat there with the engine off, hands steady on the wheel, and let my mind do what it does best. Process information systematically. A contractor finds something during renovation. He refuses to explain over the phone. He knows I have 2 sons. He insists they come with me. What could possibly be in that office that would require my entire family to witness? Marissa had been gone for a year. I had boxed up her things, donated her clothes, kept her jewelry for the boys to give their future wives. I had done everything a widower is supposed to do. I had grieved. I had moved forward. I had accepted. But acceptance, I was beginning to realize, is not the same as understanding. I took out my phone again and scrolled to Elijah's number. My oldest son, 26 years old, works in real estate development now. Sharp mind, sharper tongue. We had not spoken in 3 weeks, not because of any argument, just because that is how we were. He called when he needed something. I called when I had something to say. Neither of us was good at small talk. I pressed the call button before I could talk myself out of it. Dad? His voice sounded surprised. Everything okay? I need you to meet me somewhere today, both you and your brother. What? Why? What's going on? I'll explain when you get there. Can you reach out to your brother? There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing, probably trying to figure out what kind of emergency this was. Is this about Mom? He finally asked. I did not answer immediately, because I did not know the answer myself. Just meet me at 447 Birch Street in 2 hours. Side entrance. Bring your brother. I hung up before he could ask more questions. Then I started the car and drove away from the church, leaving the bells ringing behind me. The drive to my house took 17 minutes. I had time to think. Marissa's office on Birch Street was something she started about 12 years ago. I remembered the day she told me about it. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the boys doing homework in the living room, and she said she needed a space of her own, somewhere quiet, somewhere she could focus on her clients without distractions. I supported it. Why wouldn't I? She was smart. She had a business degree from a good university. She had worked in corporate accounting before the boys were born. When they got older, she wanted to return to work in some capacity. A small consulting practice seemed reasonable. She found the office space herself, negotiated the lease herself, furnished it herself. I never went there more than twice, once when she first signed the lease, and once when she hosted a small holiday party for her clients. Both times it seemed perfectly ordinary, a reception area, a private office, a small conference room, nothing unusual. For years I trusted that everything was exactly as she described. She would leave the house 3 or 4 mornings a week, come back in the afternoon, and talk about her clients. Small business owners who needed help with quarterly filings, elderly couples who wanted estate planning advice, normal work, normal life. Then, about 3 years before she passed, she announced she was closing the office. The lease is too expensive now, she said, and most of my clients have moved on. It's just not worth it anymore. Again, I did not question it. Businesses close all the time. The economy shifts. Client needs change. It made sense. She moved everything from the office into a storage unit on Maple Avenue. Boxes of files, old furniture, a few personal items. I helped her load the truck. It took most of a Saturday afternoon. What's in all these boxes? I asked at one point, carrying a particularly heavy one. Client records, she said. I have to keep them for 7 years. Tax law. 7 years of client records? That's a lot. She smiled. I was busy. And that was the end of the conversation. The storage unit became one of those places you forget exists. We paid the monthly fee automatically, and I never thought about it again. After Marissa passed, I drove by it once, intending to go through the boxes and clear things out, but I could not bring myself to do it. Too soon, I told myself. Too painful. Now, sitting in my kitchen with cold coffee in front of me, I wondered if I had been avoiding it for a different reason entirely. Some part of me must have sensed that those boxes contained more than tax records. I looked around my kitchen, the same kitchen where Marissa had cooked thousands of meals, the same table where we had discussed our son's futures, our retirement plans, our dreams. Everything looked the same, but suddenly it felt different, like a stage set, like furniture arranged to create an illusion of normalcy. My sons had always been closer to their mother than to me. That is just how it was. Marissa was warm, present, attentive. I was procedural. I showed love through structure, making sure bills were paid, cars were maintained, college funds were growing. I thought that was enough. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Elijah, my oldest, inherited his mother's charm and his father's stubbornness. A dangerous combination. He could talk his way into anything and refused to admit when he was wrong. We clashed often when he was a teenager. Less often now, but only because we talked less. His brother, my younger son, was different. Quieter. More like me in some ways, but without my need for order. He drifted through life, avoiding conflict, avoiding decisions. He worked as a freelance graphic designer, which meant he worked when he felt like it and struggled when he didn't. He was 23 years old and still figuring out who he was. Both boys had taken their mother's passing hard. Elijah threw himself into work, making deals, closing sales, proving he was successful. The younger one withdrew, spending more time alone, responding to texts with single words. Neither of them had much patience for my grief. They expected me to move on faster than I was moving. They dropped hints about selling the house, about starting fresh, about not dwelling on the past. I ignored these hints. This was my home. These were my memories. I would leave when I was ready. Now I wondered if they were not trying to bury the past. They were trying to avoid excavating it. I finished my coffee and looked at the clock. An hour left before the meeting at Birch Street. Enough time to do something I should have done months ago. I drove to the storage unit on Maple Avenue. The facility was a row of garage-style doors, all painted the same shade of rust orange. Unit 47 was at the end of the row, padlocked with a combination lock I had not opened in a year. It took me 3 tries to remember the numbers. Marissa's birthday reversed. The door rolled up with a grinding screech. Inside, the boxes were stacked exactly as we had left them. Dusty now, smelling of cardboard and stale air. I stood at the threshold, looking in. There were at least 40 boxes, some labeled in Marissa's handwriting. Client files 2010, 2012, office supplies, tax references. Others were unlabeled. Those were the ones that caught my attention. A dozen boxes with no markings at all, pushed to the back like they were meant to be forgotten. I took one step inside, then another. My hand reached for the nearest unlabeled box, and then I stopped. Not yet, not here, not alone. Whatever was in these boxes could wait. Whatever was in that office building could not. I stepped back, pulled the door down, and relocked it. The boys needed to see this with me, all of it, together. Some truths are too heavy for one person to carry. I arrived at my customs brokerage office around 11 that morning. I had not planned to stop there, but old habits are hard to break. When I am uncertain, I go to work. Work makes sense. Work has rules. The office was half empty, as it usually is on Sundays. Only essential staff handling weekend shipments. My colleagues nodded as I walked in, then went back to their computers. Nobody asked why I was there on my day off. Nobody asked about anything, really. That was the nature of my position. I had been with the company for 23 years, but I had never climbed the ladder. Not because I was incompetent, my accuracy rating was among the highest in the region, but because I was quiet. I did not network. I did not advocate for myself. I came in, did my job, and went home. In a company where promotion depended on visibility, I was invisible. I sat at my desk and pretended to check emails, scrolling through messages I had already read twice, flagging threads that didn't need attention. My fingers moved out of habit, muscle memory from years of office routine, but my mind wasn't there. It kept circling back to Gavin Holt's phone call, replaying every word, every pause. What could they possibly have found in that office? And why insist that both of my sons be present? The questions gnawed at me, settling somewhere behind my eyes. Birch Street had been sealed off in my mind for a year now, packed away with everything else connected to Marissa. I hadn't driven past the building once, not out of fear exactly, more like a quiet agreement with myself not to disturb whatever remained buried there. At around 11:30, my office phone rang. The sharp trill cut through the silence. Internal call. "Trenner? You're here?" Denise Kirby's voice carried the same clipped impatience it always did. 42, sharp-eyed, perpetually efficient. She had been promoted over me 5 years ago, and she had never quite let me forget it. "Just catching up on some filings," I said, keeping my tone light. "On a Sunday?" she replied. You need a hobby, Reid." The call cut off before I could respond. That was how most of our conversations ended, abrupt, unfinished, as if anything more simply wasn't worth the time. I shut down my computer, gathered my coat, and left the office just after noon. The streets were quiet as I drove downtown, the city moving at its slower Sunday pace. I checked my phone at a red light. No replies yet. I had texted both boys the cafe address an hour earlier. They would come. Elijah always did, if not out of respect, then curiosity. And his brother would come because Elijah told him to. The cafe sat on a narrow corner lot, its sign swinging slightly in the breeze. The copper mug, dark wood interior, exposed brick walls, industrial light fixtures, overpriced coffee and carefully curated discomfort. The kind of place Marissa used to love. She liked places that tried a little too hard. I ordered a black coffee and slid into a corner booth where I could see the door. The mug was hot against my palms, grounding me. I watched people come and go, each time feeling a small jolt of anticipation. Elijah arrived first. He spotted me immediately, crossed the room with long, confident strides, and dropped into the seat across from me without bothering with a greeting. "What's this about, Dad?" "Wait for your brother." "He's parking," Elijah said. "Tell me now." I studied my oldest son as he leaned forward, elbows on the table. He had Marissa's eyes, dark brown, sharp, always assessing. But where her gaze had once held warmth and patience, his carried calculation, ambition, a constant need to be moving towards something bigger, more money, more status, more validation. I had never known where that hunger came from. It certainly hadn't come from me. "It's about your mother's old office," I said finally. "The one on Birch Street." Something crossed his face. Just a flicker, gone almost as soon as it appeared. Then his expression smoothed out. "The office she shut down?" he said. "What about it?" They're renovating the building. The contractor found something. He asked us to come take a look. Found what? He wouldn't say. Elijah leaned back, crossing his arms. So a random contractor calls you, refuses to explain, and you decide to drag us into it? Dad, it's probably nothing. An old filing cabinet, a box of tax returns. You know how these things go. He specifically asked me to bring both of you. That stopped him. Why? He asked. I don't know, I said. That's why we're going. The cafe door opened again, letting in a rush of cool air. My younger son stepped inside. He looked worn down. Dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed, jacket wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. He spotted us, hesitated for a moment, then walked over and slid into the booth beside his brother. What's going on? He asked quietly. Dad's chasing ghosts, Elijah said, without looking at him. Some contractor dug up something in Mom's old office, and Dad thinks it's a mystery. It might be nothing, I said, but we're going anyway. My younger son nodded slowly. He didn't press. He never did. He had always been like that, accepting, adaptable, quietly present. Where Elijah pushed, he yielded. Where Elijah questioned, he observed. Elijah wasn't finished. Look, Dad, he said, lowering his voice slightly. I get that you're still processing everything. We all are. But Mom's been gone for a year. Maybe it's time to stop reopening old doors. Digging through boxes won't change anything. Something tightened in my chest at that, a familiar pressure. I'm not digging through anything, I said, keeping my voice steady. I was asked to come, and I'm going. And you want us there because... What? Elijah scoffed. Moral support? Someone to hold your hand? I met his gaze and didn't look away. Because whatever is in that office apparently involves our entire family, I said, and I think we all deserve to know why. For a moment, no one spoke. The espresso machine hissed behind the counter. A couple at the next table laughed at something on their phone, oblivious. Life continuing as usual. Then my younger son broke the silence. I'll come, he said simply. Elijah exhaled sharply and rubbed his face. Fine, let's get this over with. We stood and left the cafe together. 3 men stepping out into the street, walking towards something none of us understood, each of us carrying a different version of the same unease, whether we admitted it or not. In the car, I thought about what Elijah had said. Mom's been gone for a year. Maybe it's time to let go. He was right about one thing. It had been a year, but I was not holding on to grief anymore. I was starting to realize I had been holding on to something else entirely, an illusion, a carefully constructed story that Marissa had told me for years that I had never thought to question. The office building on Birch Street was only 10 minutes away now. Whatever was waiting for us there had been waiting for a long time. Some discoveries do not ask for permission. They simply arrive, and everything changes. We did not go directly to Birch Street that afternoon. Something told me to wait. I dropped the boys at Elijah's apartment and told them I would pick them up at 4 o'clock. They protested, but I insisted. I needed time to think. I needed to prepare. My first stop was the law office of Helen Moore on Fifth Avenue. Helen was an old friend of the family. Or rather, an old friend of Marissa's. They had met at some charity event years ago and stayed in touch. Helen specialized in estate law, property disputes, administrative filings. After Marissa passed, Helen had helped me navigate the probate process. She was calm, precise, and utterly professional. Her receptionist recognized me and waved me through. Helen was at her desk, surrounded by stacks of paper, reading glasses perched on her nose. Reid, I wasn't expecting you. She gestured to the chair across from her. Is everything all right? I'm not sure, I said honestly. I received a strange phone call this morning from the contractor renovating Marissa's old office building. Helen's expression did not change, but I noticed her hand pause over the document she had been reviewing. What kind of phone call? He found something during the demolition. He wants me to see it. He specifically asked me to bring both of my sons. Silence. Helen removed her reading glasses and set them on the desk. What do you think he found? I don't know. That's why I'm here. I was hoping you could tell me something about the office lease. Any details Marissa might have mentioned to you. Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to her filing cabinet, pulling out a thin folder. Marissa asked me to handle some of the administrative aspects of the office over the years. Nothing major. Lease renewals, amendment filings, that sort of thing. Amendment filings? Yes. Standard stuff, usually. Extending the lease term, updating the signatory information. She trailed off, flipping through the folder. There was one thing that always struck me as odd, she continued. About 5 years ago, Marissa asked me to add a second party to the lease agreement. A business partner, she said. My heart began to beat faster. Who? Helen looked up from the folder. A man named Dorian Pike. I had never heard that name before, not once in all my years of marriage. Who is Dorian Pike? I never met him personally. Marissa handled all the communication, but his signature is on multiple documents relating to the office, lease amendments, utility agreements, even a small business loan application. A business loan? Helen nodded slowly. Secured against the office property. Taken out 8 years ago. Paid off 3 years later, according to the records. I sat very still, processing this information. Did Marissa ever explain the nature of their business relationship? No, and I never asked. It wasn't my place. Helen paused. Reid, what exactly do you think is going on here? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. I thanked her for the information and drove to the City Records building on Main Street. It was a gray institutional structure, all concrete and fluorescent lighting, the kind of place where paper trails go to become permanent. I requested copies of all documents associated with 447 Birch Street, lease agreements, building permits, business registrations. The clerk was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes who typed my request into her computer without enthusiasm. Some of these files are sealed, she said after a moment. Do you have authorization from the property owner? My wife was one of the lessees. She passed away last year. The clerk looked at me with something approaching sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, but I still need authorization from the current property holder or a court order to release sealed documents. What's sealed exactly? She checked her screen. A series of amendments filed between 7 and 5 years ago. Also some financial disclosure forms. Can you tell me anything about them, even generally? She hesitated, then glanced around to make sure no one was watching. The amendments involve changes to the lease structure, additional parties, modified terms, that kind of thing. Standard business stuff mostly, except what? Except one of the amendments includes a reference to a safe deposit allocation on the premises. That's unusual. Most commercial leases don't include provisions for on-site secure storage. A safe. There was a safe in that office. I thanked the clerk and walked back to my car. The afternoon sun was low now, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I sat behind the wheel and looked at the manila envelope in my hands, the documents they had been able to release. Property registration, original lease from 14 years ago, nothing incriminating on the surface. But now I had a name, Dorian Pike. And I had a destination, a safe inside a building that was being torn apart. I took out my phone and texted both of my sons. 447 Birch Street, 4:30 p.m. Side entrance, though don't be late. Then I drove to pick them up. Whatever was in that safe, whatever Marissa had hidden for all those years, it was finally going to see the light of day. And my sons were going to witness it with me. The drive to Birch Street was mostly quiet. Elijah sat in the front passenger seat, scrolling through his phone with aggressive thumb movements. My younger son was in the back, staring out the window at the passing buildings, lost in whatever internal world he usually occupied. I did not try to start conversation. There was nothing to say yet, not until we saw what was waiting for us. The building at 447 Birch Street was a 3-story brick structure, probably built in the 1960s. Most of the windows were covered with protective sheeting, and construction equipment was parked along the curb. The renovation was clearly in mid-progress, scaffolding on the east side, debris containers by the loading dock. I pulled into the small parking lot and turned off the engine. This is it? Elijah asked, looking at the building with obvious skepticism. This is the big mystery? This is where your mother worked for 12 years, I said quietly. Let's go see what they found. We got out of the car and walked toward the side entrance. The door was propped open with a concrete block, and I could hear voices inside. Workers discussing something in casual tones. A man appeared in the doorway as we approached. Mid-40s, stocky build, wearing a hard hat and a fluorescent safety vest. He looked relieved when he saw me. Mr. Trenner? That's me. These are my sons. Gavin Holt nodded and shook each of our hands. His grip was firm but nervous. Thank you for coming. I know this is unusual, but when my crew broke through the wall in the East Wing, we found something that I didn't feel right handling on my own. What exactly did you find? Elijah asked. Gavin looked at me, then back at Elijah. It's better if I show you. Please follow me. He led us through a dusty hallway lined with exposed wiring and torn-up flooring. The building smelled like old paint and construction dust. Every surface was covered with decades of accumulated grime. We climbed a staircase to the second floor, then walked down another corridor. At the end was a door that looked newer than the rest, reinforced with a heavy deadbolt that had been forced open. "This is your wife's old office," Gavin said, gesturing toward the door. "At least, that's what the building records say. We didn't know anyone still had claimed this space until we started the renovation and had to verify property ownership." I looked at the door. It was painted a neutral beige, same as everything else in the building. Nothing remarkable about it from the outside. "We had to break through because the key wasn't on file anywhere," Gavin continued. "And when I saw what was inside, I knew I had to contact someone from the family." He pushed the door open and stepped back. I walked in first, and my sons followed. The office was small, maybe 15 by 20 feet. A desk against one wall, 2 filing cabinets, a row of bookshelves. Everything covered in a thick layer of dust, untouched for years. But that was not what caught my attention. In the corner of the room, behind what had once been a false wall panel, was a safe, a large industrial-grade safe, the kind you see in banks or law firms. It was about 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide, bolted to the floor. The safe door was open. "My crew found it when we were demolishing the partition wall," Gavin explained. "The safe was locked, but the door wasn't sealed properly. It popped open when we moved the debris." I walked slowly toward the safe, my heart beating in my throat. Inside were stacks of documents, folders, binders, envelopes, financial statements, legal papers, photographs, years of material, carefully organized and preserved. And on top of everything, sitting there like it had been waiting for me, was a leather-bound notebook with a single name written on the cover in Marissa's handwriting. "Dorian." I heard Elijah breathe in sharply behind me. "What the hell is this?" my younger son whispered. I reached into the safe and picked up the notebook. My hands were steady, they always were in moments of crisis, but my mind was racing. This was not tax preparation, this was not estate planning, this was something else entirely. And whatever it was, Marissa had hidden it from me for years. "Everyone sit down," I said quietly. "We need to go through this, all of it." Gavin cleared his throat. "Mr. Trenner, I think I should step outside. This seems like a family matter." I nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Holt. We'll take it from here." He left, closing the door behind him, and then it was just the 3 of us, a father and his sons, standing in a room full of secrets that had been buried for over a decade. We started with the notebook. I sat at Marissa's old desk, the leather cover heavy in my hands. My sons stood on either side of me, close enough to read over my shoulder. The dust in the air caught the late afternoon light streaming through the grimy window, creating a haze that felt almost theatrical. The first page was dated 11 years ago. The handwriting was unmistakably Marissa's. Elegant, precise, slightly slanted to the right. "Initial meeting with DP, discuss terms. He understands the requirements. This could work. DP, Dorian Pike." I turned the pages slowly. The entries were brief, utilitarian, dates, amounts, references to transactions I did not understand, meeting notes, account numbers, legal references. "What is this?" Elijah asked. His voice had lost its usual confidence. "I don't know yet," I said. "Keep reading with me." By the 10th page, a clearer picture began to emerge. Marissa and Dorian Pike had entered into some kind of financial partnership. There were references to investments, loan agreements, property holdings, amounts that made my breath catch. 50,000 here, 80,000 there, sums far larger than anything from her supposed consulting practice. "Where did she get this kind of money?" my younger son asked. I did not answer, because I was beginning to suspect the answer, and I did not want to say it out loud. I set the notebook aside and started pulling documents from the safe. Bank statements from accounts I had never seen. Property deeds for addresses I did not recognize. Investment portfolios that dated back over a decade. And then I found it. A single document, notarized and signed, dated 8 years ago. It was a partnership agreement between Marissa Trenner and Dorian Pike, establishing joint ownership of 3 commercial properties in the downtown district, properties worth, according to the assessment attached, over $2 million. $2 million. My wife had been part owner of $2 million in real estate, and I had never known. "Dad," Elijah's voice was strained. "Did you know about any of this?" "No." "None of it?" "None of it." I kept pulling documents, more bank statements, more property records. A paper trail that stretched back years, documenting a parallel financial life my wife had maintained entirely in secret. And then I found the photographs. They were in a small envelope at the bottom of the safe. Black and white, printed on matte paper. Marissa and a man I did not recognize, presumably Dorian Pike, Standing in front of one of the properties listed in the partnership agreement, they were smiling, comfortable with each other, close, too close. I heard my younger son make a sound, something between a gasp and a choke. Elijah grabbed the photographs from my hands, staring at them with wide eyes. "Who is this guy?" he demanded. "What was she doing with him?" I took the photographs back, forcing myself to look at them objectively. The man was older than me, mid-50s at least, distinguished-looking, well-dressed. He had his arm around my wife's shoulder in one of the photos, and she was leaning into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I don't know who he is," I said, "but I'm going to find out." More documents, more evidence. The story was becoming clearer with each piece of paper. Marissa had been siphoning money from our joint accounts for years. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there, always disguised as business expenses, household purchases, charitable donations. Over time, these amounts had grown. She had been transferring tens of thousands of dollars into accounts I never knew existed. Those accounts were then used to fund investments with Dorian Pike, properties, development projects, business ventures, all of it completely hidden from me, from my sons, from everyone who knew our family. "I don't understand," my younger son said. He had slumped into one of the old office chairs, staring at the floor. "Why would she do this? Why would she hide it?" "Because she didn't want us to know," Elijah said bitterly. "Because she was leading a double life." I continued reading in silence. The timeline was becoming clear now. Marissa had met Dorian Pike about 14 years ago, right around the time she opened this office. Their partnership had begun as purely financial, based on the early notes. But somewhere along the way, it had become something more. The photographs were proof of that. The dinner receipts were proof of that. The hotel reservations, filed neatly in a separate folder, were proof of that. My wife had been having an affair for over a decade, and she had used our family's money to fund her secret life with another man. I set down the last document and walked to the window. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The construction site below was quiet. The workers had gone home for the day. "Dad?" Elijah's voice was uncertain. "What are you going to do?" I turned to face my sons. Both of them looked stunned, pale, like the ground had shifted beneath their feet, which in a way it had. "I'm going to find Dorian Pike," I said, "and I'm going to get answers." My younger son shook his head. "Maybe we should just let it go. She's gone, Dad. Nothing we do now will change anything." "He's right," Elijah said, though I could hear the anger in his voice. "What's the point of digging deeper? It's not like we can confront her about it." I looked at both of them steadily. "Your mother took from this family. She lied to all of us for years. She conducted a secret life with someone else's money, our money. And if Dorian Pike is still out there, still benefiting from what she took—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Then he needs to answer for it. And so do we. We need to understand what happened, and we need to make it right." Neither of my sons responded, but I could see something shifting in their eyes. The denial was crumbling. The reality was setting in. Our mother, my wife, had not been who we thought she was, and now we had to decide what to do about it. The next 72 hours were a blur of research and investigation. I took everything from Marissa's safe, all the documents, all the photographs, all the evidence of her secret life. I spread it across my kitchen table and began the systematic work of understanding exactly what had happened. My training as a customs broker made me uniquely suited for this task. I knew how to follow paper trails, I knew how to cross-reference documents, identify discrepancies, trace financial flows. For 23 years, I had been doing exactly this kind of work for other people's shipments and business dealings. Now I was doing it for my own family. The picture that emerged was devastating but coherent. Marissa had diverted approximately $340,000 from our joint finances over a 12-year period. This money had been funneled into investment accounts controlled by her and Dorian Pike. Those accounts had then been used to purchase and develop commercial real estate. Based on the latest assessments I could find, those properties were now worth nearly $4 million. $4 million built on money stolen from my family. I found Dorian Pike's current address through public records, a large home in a wealthy suburb about 40 minutes from my house. I found his business affiliations, his professional background, his social connections. He was a real estate developer, semi-retired now, well-respected in certain circles. Nobody knew about his partnership with my late wife, at least not from what I could tell. On the third day, I called Helen Moore again. "I need your help," I said. "I found evidence that my wife diverted substantial funds from our family into a secret partnership with another man. I want to pursue legal recourse." Helen was quiet for a long moment. Reid, are you sure about this? Accusing a deceased person of financial misconduct is complicated. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm stating facts. I have the documentation to prove it. What I need to know is, do I have any legal claim to those assets? Another pause. I could hear her thinking. Potentially, yes. If the funds used for the investments were community property, which marital funds generally are, then you may have a claim to a portion of those assets. It would require litigation, discovery, possibly a forensic accountant. Whatever it takes, I said. Start the process. Reid. Helen's voice softened. I have to ask, is this really what you want? Pursuing this means making everything public. Your wife's affair, her financial deception, it will all come out. I thought about my sons, about their faces when they saw those photographs, about the way they had looked at me when we left that office, confused, betrayed, angry. My sons already know, I said. They have a right to know the truth, and they have a right to reclaim what was taken from their family. Do whatever you need to do. Helen agreed to begin the process. Meanwhile, I decided that Dorian Pike deserved a personal visit. I drove to his house the following Saturday, alone. It was a large colonial-style home with a perfectly kept lawn and a 3-car garage, the kind of place that signals wealth quietly without being flashy about it. I parked on the street and walked up the long driveway. My heart was steady. My mind was clear. I was not here for confrontation. I was here for information. The man who answered the door matched the photographs from the safe. Older now, grayer, but still recognizable. He looked at me with polite confusion. Can I help you? My name is Reid Trenner, I said. I believe you knew my wife. His expression changed immediately. The politeness drained away, replaced by wariness. I think you should leave. I'm not here to cause trouble, I continued calmly. I'm here to discuss the partnership you had with my late wife Marissa, the properties, the investments, the money that came from my family's accounts. Dorian Pike's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. I have the documentation, Mr. Pike. Bank statements, partnership agreements, property deeds. I know exactly what happened, and I know exactly how much was taken. He stared at me for a long moment. I could see him calculating his options, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. What do you want? He finally asked. A conversation? Inside? No lawyers present, just you and me? Another long pause. Then he stepped back and opened the door wider. 15 minutes, he said, and then you're leaving. I walked into his house, a home built, at least in part, with money that should have belonged to my sons. The conversation that followed was exactly what I expected. Dorian Pike denied everything at first. Then, when I presented specific documents I had brought copies of, he shifted to justification. Marissa had approached him, he said. She was unhappy in her marriage, his words, not mine, and she wanted a life of her own. He had simply helped her achieve that. She made her own choices, he said. I never forced her to do anything. You helped her steal from her family. I helped her invest in her future. There's a difference. I let him talk. I asked questions. I listened carefully. And by the end of the 15 minutes, I had a much clearer understanding of what had happened and why. Dorian Pike was not an innocent party. He had known from the beginning that Marissa's investment capital came from her marriage. He had helped her structure the transactions to avoid detection. He had benefited enormously from the arrangement. Their partnership had made him wealthy, and when Marissa was gone, he assumed the whole matter was settled, that no one would ever uncover the truth. He was wrong. My attorney will be in touch, I said, standing to leave. I intend to recover everything that was taken from my family. Every dollar, every property, every cent of profit. Dorian Pike looked at me with something approaching fear. You can't prove anything in court. It will be my word against the paperwork of a woman who's no longer here. Those papers have your signature on them, I said quietly. And signatures don't lie. I left his house feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. The truth was out now, and the truth, I was beginning to understand, was the most powerful leverage I had. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Helen Moore filed a civil suit on my behalf, alleging fraudulent misappropriation of marital assets and seeking restoration of the diverted funds plus interest. The case attracted attention from Dorian Pike's attorneys immediately, a team of expensive lawyers who began lobbying objections and procedural delays within days. But Helen was prepared. She had dealt with adversarial litigation before, and I had given her an overwhelming amount of documentation, the complete paper trail from Marissa's safe, cross-referenced with our family's financial records. The evidence was simply too strong to dismiss. More importantly, Dorian Pike was not prepared for a fight. His lawyers requested a meeting within 2 weeks of the filing. A settlement conference, they called it. I agreed to attend, along with Helen. My sons came too. The meeting took place in a conference room at Helen's law firm. Dorian Pike sat on one side of the table with his attorneys, 3 of them, all in expensive suits with serious expressions. I sat on the other side with Helen and my sons. The atmosphere was tense. Professional, but tense. Dorian Pike's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Jonathan Kerr, opened with a carefully worded statement about the complexity of the situation and the need to avoid prolonged litigation. He emphasized that his client had always acted in good faith and had no intention of causing harm to the Trenner family. I let him finish, then leaned forward. Your client participated in a 12-year scheme to divert funds from my family's accounts into investments that he personally benefited from. I have documentation proving every transfer, every transaction, every benefit. The question isn't whether he did it, the question is what he's going to do about it now. Jonathan Kerr looked uncomfortable. Dorian Pike looked worse. Mr. Trenner, the attorney said carefully, we're prepared to discuss a fair resolution, one that acknowledges the complexity of the situation while avoiding the costs and publicity of a trial. What are you offering? There was a pause, whispered consultations between Pike and his lawyers. Full liquidation of the partnership properties, Helen said, reading from a document that had been slid across the table. Proceeds to be distributed 60% to Mr. Trenner, 40% to Mr. Pike. I shook my head. 80-20. The principal investment came from my family's funds. The only thing Mr. Pike contributed was knowledge and access, neither of which justify a 40% stake. More whispered consultations. Dorian Pike's face was red now. 70-30, his attorney countered. 80-20 plus full repayment of the original diverted funds with interest calculated from the date of each transfer. The attorney started to object, but Dorian Pike raised his hand. Can we have a moment alone with my client? Jonathan Kerr asked. Helen nodded. We stepped out of the conference room. In the hallway, Elijah turned to me. Dad, are you sure about this? 80% is a lot of money. If he agrees, that's somewhere between $3 and $3.5 million, I said, after legal fees. My younger son let out a low whistle. $3 million? It's what was taken from us, adjusted for time and investment returns. It's exactly what we're owed. Elijah looked at me differently than he had in a long time, something like respect in his eyes. I underestimated you, he said quietly. I thought you were just, going through the motions, following Mom's shadow. But you actually figured this out. All of it. I met his gaze steadily. I'm a customs broker. I follow paper trails. That's what I do. Helen's office door opened, and Jonathan Kerr appeared. Mr. Trenner, my client is prepared to accept your terms. We walked back into the conference room. The settlement agreement was drafted on the spot, a comprehensive document that required Dorian Pike to liquidate all partnership assets, repay the diverted funds with interest, and waive any future claims against the Trenner family. Total recovery, $3,200,000. I signed the agreement first, then my sons, as witnesses. Then Dorian Pike, whose hand was shaking slightly as he wrote his name. When it was done, Helen's assistant made copies for everyone. The meeting broke up, the lawyers shook hands and made polite noises about hoping to avoid each other in the future. But before Dorian Pike left, I stopped him. One more thing, I said. He looked at me warily. I want you to know that this was never about the money, not really. Then what was it about? I thought about Marissa, about the woman I had loved and trusted for over 25 years, about the life I thought we had built together. It was about the truth, I said, about knowing what actually happened and making sure there were consequences for it. Dorian Pike said nothing. He turned and walked out of the conference room, followed by his attorneys. I watched him go, feeling none of the bitterness I had expected. Just a quiet, steady satisfaction. Justice had been done. 3 months after the settlement, I returned to the building on Birch Street. The renovation was complete now. The old brick structure had been transformed into a modern office complex, glass and steel and clean lines. The east wing where Marissa's office had been was now home to a technology startup, their logo bright and modern above the entrance. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, looking at the building, remembering what I had found there, understanding, finally, how much had been hidden from me and for how long. Elijah appeared beside me. He had driven over when I texted him the address. Why are we here, Dad? I wanted to see it finished, I said. The renovation, the transformation. It's just a building. It's where everything changed. He did not argue. We stood together in the late afternoon sun, watching people come and go through the new glass doors. I owe you an apology, Elijah said after a while. I looked at him. For years, I thought you were stuck, unable to move on, too focused on the past to see what was actually happening in the present. He shook his head. But you were the only one who saw the truth, the only one who was willing to dig for it. I didn't see it for a long time, I admitted. I trusted her completely. That's not a weakness, Dad. That's just love. I thought about that, about what love meant when it was misplaced, about whether trust was a virtue or a vulnerability. The money came through today, I said, changing the subject. Helen transferred the final amount this morning. Elijah nodded. I saw the account balance update. What are you going to do with it? I haven't decided yet. Some of it should go to you and your brother. It was always meant for the family. Dad, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. It's the right thing. We were quiet for a while longer. Then Elijah's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned. It's your brother. He's at your house. Says he needs to talk to you about something. I took one last look at the renovated building, then turned and walked back to my car. Let's go see what he wants. The house was warm when we arrived. My younger son was in the kitchen, making coffee, looking nervous in a way I had not seen before. What's going on? I asked, setting my keys on the counter. He handed me a cup of coffee, then sat down at the table. I've been thinking about everything that happened, he said slowly. About Mom, about what she did, about how you handled it. And? He took a deep breath. I used to think you were disconnected, like you didn't really understand people, like you lived in a world of paperwork and regulations while everyone else was having actual lives. That's a fair assessment, I said neutrally. No, it's not. He looked up at me. You were the only one who cared enough to find out what really happened. You were the only one who didn't just accept the story we were given. You dug until you found answers. That's my job. It's more than that. It's who you are. He paused. And I think I finally understand that now. Elijah sat down beside his brother. The three of us at the kitchen table, the same table where Marissa had once served us dinner, where she had smiled and laughed and hidden the entire secret life beneath the surface of normalcy. What are you saying? I asked. My younger son looked at his brother, then back at me. We're saying we're sorry. For doubting you, for dismissing you, for thinking you were the problem when you were the only one actually paying attention. I felt something shift in my chest, a tightness that had been there for a long time, finally easing. You didn't know, I said simply. None of us did. But you figured it out. And you did something about it. I nodded slowly. Yes, I did. The coffee machine gurgled in the background. Outside, the evening was settling in, the sky fading from blue to purple. So, Elijah said, what now? The settlement's done. The money's in the bank. Where do we go from here? I thought about it, about the year since Marissa's passing, about everything that had been revealed, about the family I had left, imperfect, broken in some ways, but still here, still together. Forward, I said. We go forward. My sons exchanged a look. Then they nodded, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like that was actually possible. 1 week later, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Dorian Pike. I need to see you, he said. His voice was different now, no longer polished, no longer confident. Something broken beneath the surface. One meeting, in person. I'll come to you. I almost said no. The settlement was finalized. The money was transferred. There was nothing left to discuss. But something in his voice made me curious. Tomorrow morning, I said. My house, 10 o'clock. He agreed and hung up. I did not tell my sons about the call. Whatever Dorian Pike wanted to say, I wanted to hear it first. Alone. He arrived at 10 exactly, driving a car that was noticeably less expensive than the one I had seen in his driveway months ago. Perhaps the liquidation had affected him more than I realized. I met him at the front door and led him to the living room. He sat on the edge of the couch like a man preparing to receive a verdict. Thank you for seeing me, he said. What do you want? He was quiet for a long moment, looking at his hands. I came to tell you that I'm leaving town, moving to the coast, starting over. I waited. The settlement, it took everything, not just the partnership assets, my reputation too. Word got out about what happened, about the lawsuit, about why. He looked up at me. Nobody wants to do business with me anymore. I felt no sympathy. None at all. That's a consequence, I said. Not my concern. I know, I'm not asking for sympathy. He paused. I came because I owe you something, an explanation, a confession, whatever you want to call it. You already explained yourself at our first meeting. You said Marissa came to you. You said you helped her achieve freedom. I remember your exact words. That was the version I told myself for years, the comfortable version. He shook his head slowly. But it wasn't the truth, not completely. I leaned back in my chair. Then tell me the truth, completely. Dorian Pike took a deep breath. I didn't meet Marissa by accident. I targeted her. Specifically. I knew she had access to substantial funds through her marriage. I knew she was dissatisfied, looking for something more. I cultivated her, charmed her, made her feel special and understood. My hands tightened on the armrests. The partnership was my idea from the start, he continued. The investments, the properties, all of it was designed to extract as much money as possible while keeping her attached. She thought we were building something together, but I was using her. And the personal relationship? He met my eyes for the first time. That was part of the manipulation. I told her what she wanted to hear. I made her believe I loved her. But it was always about the money. Always. The silence in the room was heavy. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of traffic outside. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I destroyed your marriage without you ever knowing it. I took your wife, emotionally, financially, in every way that mattered, and I did it deliberately. And now that it's all over, now that I've lost everything, I needed you to know what really happened. I stood and walked to the window. The neighborhood outside looked exactly as it always had. Quiet streets, well-maintained houses, cars parked in driveways, normal life continuing as if nothing had happened. Do you expect forgiveness? I asked without turning around. No, I don't expect anything. I just needed to say it. I turned to face him. My wife made her own choices. She could have said no. She could have walked away at any point. Whatever you did, you couldn't have done it without her cooperation. That doesn't excuse... I'm not excusing anything, I said sharply. I'm stating a fact. She was complicit. She chose to betray her family. She chose to lie for over a decade. You gave her the opportunity, but she made the choice. Dorian Pike stared at me. You're not angry at me. I'm furious with you, I said calmly. But I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of seeing it. You came here expecting... What? Shouting? A scene? Some kind of dramatic showdown? He said nothing. Instead, you get this. I gestured around the room. A quiet house. A man who has processed his grief and moved forward. 2 sons who understand now what kind of woman their mother really was, and $3 million in recovered assets that will go to building a future, not mourning the past. I walked to the front door and opened it. We're done here, Mr. Pike. You've made your confession, now leave, and don't contact this family again. He stood slowly, looking older than he had when he arrived. Smaller somehow. For what it's worth, he said as he passed me, I am sorry, truly. It's worth nothing, I said, but thank you for providing it anyway. He walked down the path to his car. I watched him go, making sure he actually left. When his car disappeared around the corner, I closed the door and stood in my empty living room. The house was quiet. The house was mine. The life I had now was one I had chosen, not one that had been imposed on me through deception. My phone buzzed. A text from Elijah. Dinner at my place tonight? Your brother says he's bringing a date. I smiled. The first genuine smile in what felt like months. I typed back, I'll be there. Then I put down my phone, looked around at the living room where I had spent so many years believing in a lie, and felt nothing but satisfaction. The truth had cost me my illusions, but in return, it had given me something far more valuable. Freedom, control, and the knowledge that no matter what happened next, I had faced the worst and come out stronger. My family had been betrayed, but we had also been recovered. And now we could finally move forward, together, honestly, without secrets or shadows. I had won.